had to say.
Here long ago by members of our church represents a terrible and inexcusable departure from Christian teaching and conduct. We cannot change what happened, but we can remember and honor those who were killed here.
Okay, that might be a little hard to hear. He says there's no excuse for the tragedy that happened here. So what's good about that strategy is you not only say, I'm responsible, but you say, no, I'm responsible, we're responsible, but we're not going to qualify it with any softening language. There's no excuse, but we want to offer our apology. And then this is the one I alluded to earlier, claiming regret of incident rather than role. Here you see Steve Irwin feeding an alligator or crocodile. Forgive me if I can't tell the difference. But he says, I am sincerely sorry that people have seen what I did as endangering my son. Okay? Is that apologizing? No. This is Tom Coburn, who, when NBC wanted to air Schindler's List a few years ago, he said that they were promoting gratuitous sex and violence, okay, by showing Holocaust victims. There was an outrage because obviously, you know, that's not gratuitous. But he says, I feel terrible that my criticism of NBC for airing this movie has been misinterpreted as the criticism of Schindler's List or the millions of Jews who died senselessly. Okay, so he's saying they misinterpreted. He's not really taking responsibility. And then we have a tongue-in-cheek or a sarcastic apology. And this is my longest quote, and I hesitated to do it, but every word of this is absolutely necessary. But here's Richard Gere justifying his kissing of Bollywood actress Shilpa Shetty in an AIDS awareness event in Mumbai. He violated Indian customs. And I'll read, I couldn't fit it all on the screen, but it says, I apologize to the people of India and especially to actress Shilpa Shetty for my recent behavior. I have spent a great amount of time in India over the years, so I can neither defend nor explain my lack of understanding of your culture, as repressed and antiquated as it might be. I also understand that the enormous amounts of time and money I have devoted towards saving the Indian people from poverty and death will do nothing to alleviate the great offense I have inflicted upon you. It is my humble pledge to no longer insult the integrity of the Indian people through my tireless charity work when it is clear they would prefer the abject misery of an AIDS epidemic to the threat of further displays of affection by an ignorant foreigner. Okay, so I'm a teacher. I know you don't go with the long quotes because it just bores people to death, but I thought that one was kind of interesting, so I kept it. Okay, so why is this all important? First of all, one thing that I would suggest is that barring legal considerations and obviously innocence, okay, you don't want to admit to something you didn't do, well, most times, but mortification is the best strategy. You should take direct and unqualified responsibility. Also, media and technology is changing the way we apologize, okay? So we have tweeting, we have websites, we have YouTube. You know, these really change the landscape of public apology. So if you make a mistake, it's not as likely that this is going to fly under the radar. People are going to notice it. Also, like I mentioned, public apology is a male-dominated activity. And like I mentioned before, men might screw up more, possibly. Women might get caught less, okay? Or they might occupy positions in the social hierarchy that generates attention. I'm going to go with number 2 on that one. Yes. Okay. Additionally, the data confirms some of our stereotypes about people. For example, women use more mortification, right? Women are the types that use communication to build relationships and maintain relationships. Why do men communicate? To get things done, instrumental purposes. So maybe that's why women use mortification, because they're trying to keep the peace and maintain relationships. Politicians also are kind of fitting into the stereotype there. Additionally, some of them run counter to our stereotypes, like women engaged in more violence. That's not what we'd expect. Another thing that runs counter to stereotypes is men and women were equal on bigotry, drugs, and inappropriate comments. So those of you out there that support the equality of men and women, I'm not quite sure that's what you were going for. But it is comforting to me to know that, you know, women are screwing up as much as we are. Okay. Additionally, the variety of offenses is pretty interesting. Okay. If you think about it, here's an example. Bill Maher referred to his children, his dogs, as retarded children. How do you apologize for that? What do? You know, Aristotle says rhetoric is the faculty of observing the available means of persuasion. What that means to me is we need to have the flexibility and the tools to be able to respond to different situations. So if Ashley Simpson lip syncs, or there's a wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, or Dan Quayle's potato incident, or Applebee's serving booze to a toddler, you know, what's the playbook for that? Can you go to a PR textbook and it'll tell you what to do? No, I don't think necessarily it will. But if you have the skills, you can do that. One of the primary limitations of this research is that we don't do anything with, it doesn't tell us much about interpersonal relationships. And the reason is because a lot of our conversations and our mistakes in interpersonal relationships happen behind closed doors and they're not observed. But I think we can learn a few things from this. For example, here are my suggestions to you. First, if you're guilty, take responsibility. You indicate your role. You say, I did this, not, I did this, but I'm sorry that this happened, and I regret that you misinterpreted what I said. No, you indicate your role in it. The second thing you do is you use unqualified language. So if I offended my mother, I hurt her feelings, I'm not going to say, Mom, I offer a complete and utter retraction, and I deeply regret any distress that my comments may have caused you. No, you say, Mom, I'm really sorry for what I said. Please forgive me. You also don't use any strategies that would detract from your apologies. So don't say, I'm really sorry, but it wasn't that bad what I did. You know what I mean? Why do people do that? Resist the temptation to take away from your apology. And then the last thing I would say is consider your tone. So an example of this is Tiger Woods. Verbally and language-wise, his apology was really good, but his tone was like, I'm deeply sorry for what I did. The words were great, but the tone wasn't that good, okay? Let me just end by saying at the beginning I showed you a montage where the lyric was playing in the background by this band, One Republic, where they said, it's too late to apologize, you know that word? I think that lyric evokes a sense of the cynicism that we have about apologies. There are so many happening that we tend to believe they're more expedient than heartfelt. And my feeling is, go ahead and be cynical. Be cynical about the public figures that are apologizing, but don't take that cynicism into your interpersonal relationships and be kind of jaded toward the apologies that are happening in your own relationships. I'd like to take some questions now if you'd like. Can we hit the lights? And if anybody has a question,
And if I may, before we take questions from the audience, are we not gifted here at SUU to have such a distinguished professor in Kevin Stein? And Kevin, just a couple of thank yous in addition to your gifted talk. Andrew Marvick for chairing the faculty committee that had the great wisdom to select Kevin as well. So a round of applause for our gifted faculty. And finally, the moderator's privilege of maybe kicking off the Q&A session for a few minutes. Sure. You talked about mortification. What advice would you give us in terms of the timing of the mortification? Tiger Woods took a long time to show any sense of mortification. Yeah.
Well, that's a hard one to answer because it's kind of arbitrary when you do that. I can think of a couple examples where they came out with it really fast and it didn't work for them. For example, when we crashed our spy plane in the Soviet Union, we immediately said, this is a weather plane, we weren't spying, this was on gathering data on meteorological whatever, okay? And then they found out that the Soviet Union had our plane, they had evidence that it was a spy plane, and then they were caught in their lie. So you don't want to come out with it right away. Tiger Woods, he waited a long time, I can't remember how many weeks it was, but he let this fester and fester, and it just became much more dramatic. And so my advice to you is to, and like I indicated earlier, understand the types of offenses that have been done before, understand the strategies that are available, and then tailor those strategies to what the offense is. And it's going to take some time to figure it out. You can't wait too long, but I wouldn't post something on Twitter 2 seconds after it happened. I would think about what the best strategy is and come out with it very soon. But that's the advice that I would give you for that. you.